Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's episode, I'm going to review the film Materialists. And in the second half, I'm going to review the movie The Life of Chuck. So starting off with Materialists, I was actually very excited for this movie. I loved the writer and director Celine Song's movie Past Lives from 2023. Song did just an amazing, excellent job with that film and made something that felt very personal and touching to me. It just stuck with me a lot, and it just kind of the themes it explored, the way it explored it was just a very emotional experience to me. It's a movie that I've been thinking a lot about since I watched it. And what that movie did was kind of look at a couple's relationship and ask, what if? Not to really give much more info there because I think it's best that you kind of go in to that film blind and just kind of like experience it for yourself. But just kind of ask this question of what if, what if things happen differently? And now with Materialists, Song takes a look at a couple's relationship and asks, why? And what I mean by that is the movie is largely a commentary on dating culture, modern dating in particular. It explores how people don't really value being in love and wanting a relationship that lasts a lifetime. They just want looks and money, and, it's exploring how a lot of people look at these, people as like a set of boxes to check off, and the more a person has, the more value they possess. It's not really about love, it's just about how much can we get this person. It's not really about love, it's just about, how much does this person look like the ideal soulmate? How much does this person look like the person who's going to make everyone in my family jealous? And I think that's a really interesting topic to make a movie about. It's something I haven't really seen before, and I just think it's very fascinating. And I'm not going to get too far into it because I don't want to spoil the film, but it's a pretty interesting idea, and I just think as a romance goes, it's a very interesting way to look at it. I mean, I really think it's like someone else, some other critic kind of mentioned this. It's a very sobering kind of movie. It's a very sobering look at dating, and it's almost an anti-rom-com in some ways. So just kind of putting that out there. I agree with that bit completely, and I think that really just kind of nails, what this movie is. But look, for the movie itself, it's about a matchmaker played by Dakota Johnson, who is very successful at what she does, and she begins to date this rich, seemingly perfect guy played by Pedro Pascal. And then her ex-boyfriend comes into the picture, played by Chris Evans, who lives a very different kind of life, as you see in the movie. And I'm not gonna lie, this movie is very predictable, largely because it leans into familiar tropes that we've seen many times before. I mean, if you haven't seen a movie where a girl has to choose between, the rich guy or the guy who doesn't have a lot of money, it's like you've seen that everywhere. I mean, it's in like Hallmark movies, it's in just your general rom-coms, whatever it may be, and we all kind of know how that story goes. But I didn't mind it here, because similar to Past Lives, Celine Song leans into similar tropes and finds ways to subvert them or do something interesting with them that maybe you didn't expect. She makes a tender, heartfelt movie that isn't afraid to look at some of the more rough and serious aspects of dating, and she does it in a way that's very mature, very thoughtful and delicate, and just very tender. I think Celine Song just has a very tender way of doing her stories that just feels very, again, delicate is a good word for it, because it feels very carefully thought out. It's not doing anything too crazy. It's just kind of really like kind of giving different perspectives on things, and I really appreciate that. She makes all the characters are usually, real feeling people. They feel like real people, like in Past Lives, kind of the way it explored kind of like maybe this other person coming into the picture. He could have been the really annoying guy that's like he's jealous and everything, but no, it's a really interestingly, mature, realistic interpretation of something, and I think she just does a very good job with that. And look, this whole movie is basically about a love triangle, and to me that's one of the worst romance tropes I can think of. It's so overused, makes for a lot of unnecessary drama, and usually goes on for way too long. But Materialist finds a way to make that love triangle feel layered and complex, and I really appreciated that. I mean, it's a trope I really hate, but here it works. And the whole movie is this whole trope. This whole trope is like Goes on for the entire movie, basically, almost the entire movie. And the thing is, it's not just about who will the matchmaker choose. It's not just about that. It's about what she wants out of both people and, what she desires most. Like, which thing is going to take over more. And the choice of who to go with may seem obvious on paper. And, if you've seen all these movies, it really may seem clear. But it's really not here because this movie just kind of explores how, if all a person cares about is a good bank account and attractiveness, love may not be enough. And I'm not going to really say much more than that, but it's just a very interesting kind of critique on dating culture. All of the performances in this film are quite good. Dakota Johnson is a very underrated actor, in my opinion. She's been great, though, in really everything I've seen her in. I mean, she's had a few bad movies, like Madame Web, but that wasn't her fault. She just does a great job here. Pedro Pascal is also as charming as always. He feels like he's been in everything now. I mean, like literally ever since like 2019 or 2020 or so, like it feels like he's in everything. This year especially, he's in like at least 5 movies. I don't know, it's ridiculous, but it's great. I love seeing Pedro Pascal. And then Chris Evans here plays his role perfectly too, and he's just a very charming actor. I mean, Chris Evans he hasn't really picked the best movies to be in lately, I have to say. Like, besides his Marvel stuff, he's had a bit of a hard time figuring out roles, but he was just perfect here. Really good job, and I was very impressed with all 3. And then I also have to shout out actress Zoe Winters in this movie for having some of the hardest material to work with, but she makes it work. She just does something that's really powerful, and I enjoyed her performance a lot. But kind of expanding on what I mentioned earlier, this movie is also very serious at times. If you go into this movie expecting a rom-com, you will probably be disappointed or turned off by some of what happens, and I blame the marketing for that. And I think marketing is like a whole separate conversation I could have about movies because, the trailers for this looked very much like a rom-com. It looked very, funny, it looked light. But do not let that fool you. I mean, this movie is a lot darker than it may seem on paper. Not like crazy dark, but it goes into some dark places that maybe, you wouldn't expect it to go to. Look, just don't blame the movie, blame the marketing, because the marketing should have understood the assignment better, but clearly it worked because it got a lot of people to watch the movie. But as I've seen, audiences have kind of turn their backs to this film a little bit. And I'm not sure if it's because they just didn't like the movie or because it wasn't what they expected. That's TBD a little bit. But I've already seen some reviews from the general public aside who have either completely missed the point of the movie, in my opinion, or at least just see the most surface level version of it. Like, yes, this movie is about love and class, but that's a very surface level takeaway. The real meanings behind the movie are about dating expectations, looking for perfection in someone, and how people care about someone's value over actually being valued by them. It's a lot deeper than it may seem, and the more I think about it, the more I just appreciate what the movie has to say. I think it just does something very different, and you may think this movie is just saying something you already heard a million times over. I think it's saying a lot more than that, but I guess that's just what makes horse races. But I think the film is very well made overall. I do have a few issues that I'll list here. One is that the pacing is pretty slow. Like, it definitely feels a bit longer than it is. And I was looking at my watch a few times, which isn't a great sign. I feel like that really says the pacing isn't great if I'm checking my watch. And another thing is there's a very unclear passage of time in this film. It's often unclear how much time passes between certain sections of the film, and at times that made things very jarring. Like, something would happen, and, in my head I'd be like, didn't we just see this happen, like, a few minutes ago? Like, is it that much time pass? And then it's like, I guess it did. I don't know how much time passed. Like, there's no card saying, like, oh, a few months later. I feel like that would have helped this movie a little bit because I feel like some moments would have been more emotional if I wasn't just taken out of the moment being like, how much time just passed here, Like, you'll know what I mean if you see it, but I think that would have fixed the movie just a little bit. Just that easy little thing of just putting, like, a 2 months later card or a few months later, would have fixed a lot of little small moments. But otherwise, this is a movie that I do think is worth checking out, especially if you've been craving a new romance film. We haven't gotten too many of those these days. but the movie is very funny at times. Even though I said it's more of a drama, it does have some nice humor there. But just do know it is more of a serious film. The overall package here is not a comedy, but it does have some good moments of humor and a lot of drama. I just think it's a very solid film. I'm going to rate it a B plus. I didn't like Materialists quite as much as I did Past Lives, which I think is like a near masterpiece. But even so, it's still one of the better movies I've seen so far this year. All right, and next up is The Life of Chuck. I actually have quite a bit to say about this little movie. I went into this film knowing very little about it. All I knew is that it's from a director I like, based on work from an author I admire, and it has a very good cast. The movie is by writer-director Mike Flanagan, and he's adapting a short story by Stephen King. If you don't know Mike Flanagan, he's done a bunch of TV shows for Netflix, mostly horror stuff. He's a big horror director. I mostly know, I think his film Doctor Sleep, his movie Doctor Sleep, and even Ouija, Origin of Evil, very pleasant surprise. Oculus, he's done some good stuff. Hush, but he's a very big horror filmmaker. Really admire the guy, and Stephen King, obviously, you know who that is. If you know any like horror story or book ever, it's Stephen King. He's also done some, good drama stuff too, like Shawshank Redemption. But I didn't really know what this movie was actually about, which actually made the experience really interesting. It's the kind of movie that I would say you have to go in blind, and I know I say that a lot on this podcast. I say like, oh, you gotta watch it blind. You can't go in expecting anything. You gotta just don't watch the trailer, just go see it. But I really do mean that for this film. Like, some movies just have to be seen blind. Some movies I just recommend it. This movie is like a must. Do not watch anything, because the first 30 minutes of this movie is almost a mystery. Characters spend a lot of time trying to figure out what's going on exactly. It's unclear what's happening or where the movie's going. You're just kind of like figuring it out with the characters, like what exactly is going on. And even the structure of this movie is kind of like a twist. It's something I don't want to spoil because it's best left as a surprise. Like, you don't know what's happening. You don't know, the order of which things take place. It's just a really interesting part of the movie, and I think just everything about the movie as a whole is very much like, if you can just watch it in real time and react in real time, it'll affect your opinion on it. If you know, it won't like ruin the movie for you, but I think just it's a great surprise, and I think watching it again, it'll be even better. In the beginning of the movie, I knew I liked it, but I had a lot of questions. Like, it was almost too weird, the kind of mystery that was going on. I was like, I'm really enjoying this, but this one thing here is just like, what's happening with that? Like, what is going on? But once it clicked to me about what was really happening and what this movie was doing, I was so locked in. Like, I was really liking it a lot. But look, forgive me if I'm very vague about this movie, and I'll probably try to make this a fairly quick review because I don't want to say too much, but I was just pretty floored by how good this movie is, man. Like, it's really, really good. It's like the kind of movie I've just been waiting for a while, like this kind of drama, a little bit of sci-fi, coming of age, sort of like different genre bending movie. Like, it's so hard to describe it, but it just does so much so well, and I loved a lot of what this movie did with character work and just themes and the writing, just all of it. Really, really impressive. And it's one of those films where you see certain things out of context at the beginning of the film. You just don't really understand exactly what they're talking about or why they're saying it or what they're looking at. And then later on, throughout the film, you begin to understand the context more, and the whole movie just becomes so much richer because of it, and you just appreciate everything that came before it. Any problems that I had with the movie in the beginning of maybe like, oh, I don't really get this, went away immediately, and I think it'll be even better on a second watch. Without saying too much, this movie is really just about enjoying life, enjoying the small moments in it, and making the most of your time here on this earth. A lot of movies have this message. It's not really a new message by any means, but The Life of Chuck just does it in a way that I found incredibly profound and heartfelt and emotionally resonant. All the performances are great here. Chiwetel Ejiofor, Karen Gillan, Mark Hamill, Tom Hiddleston, and Matthew Lillard, among many others. Everyone does a great job. I mean, really everyone. I don't mean just like general sense, but I mean like literally everyone in this movie is really good. Some got me very emotional. Others had me on the edge of my seat. Just everyone just really brought something to this movie, and it felt like everyone had their heart in it. Like it really felt like everyone was trying their best. Really impressed by the performances here. And I love the way Mike Flanagan directs and writes this movie. It definitely has the feeling of a Stephen King idea, you know what I mean? Like, some movies you could just like, oh, that's so Stephen King. Like, the same way you're like, oh, that's so M. Night Shyamalan. But it just has so much heart and soul to it. It actually reminded me a lot of a Steven Spielberg movie. And I say that in the best of ways. Just some moments here were like, it just had so much wonder and awe and sort of like magic to it. It's hard to explain unless you see it, but it's that feeling you get when you just watch a really good movie, especially like a Spielberg movie, and you're just like, wow, that was just magic. And a lot of the movie is simply people talking about science and math and dancing, things that maybe wouldn't even seem that interesting on the surface, but it's just done in this really fascinating and interesting way where I just wanted to hear every word and understand the meaning behind everything, especially because I think there is sort of like this other layer beneath everything that's like even everything that may just seem surface level, like there's a lot going on under the surface there of like, what does this mean? What is this? Why is this character doing this right now? Like, what's going on here? And I just thought it was a movie that had my gears turning in my head a lot, like trying to figure out everything. And I feel like those are the most fun, movies to watch just because of how much they make you think. And even though the movie is largely a drama, there is a small science fiction element to it that I thought fit in very perfectly, actually. I think it really worked. It didn't feel like too much. It just felt like the right amount. Maybe in a moment you might be like, seems like a little too weird, but trust me, it works. And if you're not vibing with the movie in the first 30 minutes, I understand. Just give it a chance because I promise you, if you do give it that chance, it'll win you over. I only really do have a couple small nitpicks with the movie. One is that it relies a bit too heavily on narration. Nick Offerman plays the narrator, and he does a good job. I just wish there was kind of less of it. I'm not big on narration. I think it works in small doses, but this movie has a lot of narration. Maybe just cut like half of it out. I wish, it didn't bother me. Like, it didn't really take me out of the movie. I just would have liked a little less. And the other thing is towards the end of the movie, I just noticed it was feeling a bit on the long side. Like, not a lot. Maybe just 5 minutes too long. A few things that could have maybe trimmed out of there. But as a whole, this is just such a well-made and wonderful film. I love the cinematography, the music, the editing, the lighting, the story, all of it. Everything I mentioned before, the writing, directing, acting, it's all so good. I think the best way to put it is that some movies make our days better, some movies make our lives better, and The Life of Chuck does both. So I just really think this is an important movie to check out. It's a great film. I think the odds are it's not going to be up for Best Picture this year, but if it is, I will be very happy. Right now, it's absolutely in my top 3 of the year so far. I mean, we're not even halfway in yet, but I think it'll absolutely be on my top 10 by the end of the year. Really good film, and I'm going to rate this movie an A. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve the show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.